Hello and welcome, everyone. I have such an incredible guest for you guys today. Joining me is Kacie Aileen Knight. She is a very multidimensional individual, very talented and gifted healer, facilitator. And we're going to talk a little bit about tapping into your soul's authentic truth and how that can sometimes support you better, right, in your goals, your manifestations, your impact, because we're not replicating what has been taught to us. We're actually doing it in a way that sort of anchors in, right, your divine purpose and also creates more synchronicities that can support you. So this is Kacie Knight. She's a multidimensional alchemist, divine channel, and spiritual teachers for the new earth. She guides light workers, healers, and intuitives into full embodiment of their soul gifts so that they can create abundance, live their purpose, and become magical AF leaders of collective evolution. Hey, Kacie, so great to have you with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This conversation already feels so rich and ripe and juicy, so it's perfect.
Beautiful. So we had talked a couple of weeks ago, just personally around navigating the unraveling, right, with some of the shoulds of business, and also challenging, right, the excuse my French, but the mindfuck that can come with doubting whether your desires are valid. I had reached out to Kacie when I was navigating, some new changes in my business, and my body was desiring more play, more spaciousness, more free time, and it was totally like it was a contradiction compared to all of the hustle and building and things that I've done. So we decided to have this conversation to see what your perspective is around people who are going down around a path where it maybe feels forced, right? Or they have some resistance and blocks. And how do you know the difference between pushing past, right, your comfort zone, which is valid. Sometimes we need to outcreate ourselves, versus actually being misaligned with your full expression or the way that you're actually being guided to figure things out.
Yeah, it is such a mindfuck. And it is also this piece that takes a lot of nuance. I think we have to remember that it's an and also kind of thing. Yeah. When we're growing, when we're evolving, we have to get out of the comfort zone. That is the literal process of growth and evolution, and it's going to be hard. And I always say that it's hard until it isn't, right? Like until we have experienced it and maybe practiced it until it becomes familiar, then we can tap into the ease and the grace. So especially for entrepreneurs, there is this conversation around hustle, and it can be very old paradigm full of the shoulds. And then you have another conversation that might be framed in divine feminine energetics. That's like, it's ease and it's pleasure and it's grace. And it's like, it's got to be actually a divine union of it. Right. And I feel like a lot of people miss the conversation about the bridge that we have to walk over. The people that are in a place where they have been putting in the work, they have been putting in the reps, they have put in the structures, they've earned the ability to lean back and relax, sometimes have trouble realizing they're at that place where the systems and structures they have create can support them now.
So what are some signs? That's huge, actually, because I can resonate with that totally. In my early on spiritual, journey, I unraveled the whole need to be in the corporate workforce and yada, yada, yada. But I was way overly in my feminine the first time I went all in to, be on my purpose. And I didn't have enough money coming in. I was nearly evicted. Like I could not pay the bills because I was meditating and kumbayaing all day, but not actually doing anything to support myself, right? So in that moment, I made a pretty strong, I want to say vow because vows are very harsh, but I made a promise to myself that I would never, ever go back to only pursuing spiritual and completely neglecting the real life practical demands. But now, new level, new devil kind of thing. How would somebody know if they're at the place where they've actually built enough to create that sort of grace period now to enjoy more or to lean back or to, dial in a different lifestyle?
Yeah, I feel like it, and it doesn't all happen at once. It's more of the energetic awareness and you bumping up against certain things that feel like they're an upper limit. So, the first 6 figures can typically be created pretty easily through hustle. That's how I did mine. And then it's really hard to scale beyond that just by adding more hustle, we literally reach max capacity, and the nervous system starts to honestly really feel it. You start to maybe experience little bits of burnout, and things can be less satisfying, and the business starts to be capped by your capacity, your energy, and your ability to put in the work. And so that is typically the point at which we need to start exploring, is this, have I created the systems and structures where I can actually lean back a bit? And it's not that it happens all at once either. And you can build a business with having some of this in mind, but whenever you're starting anything, new gym routine, new habits of any kind, there's going to be a little bit more work that you have to put in.
For sure. For sure. That's a really great awareness too, right? Because a lot of the times we are sometimes doing the things that are uncomfortable to set us up for the future that we want. And that's almost, I don't like the word sacrifice because it's not about that. It's making a conscious investment. Like, is this worth it, right? To 7 figures. Is this worth it to have a freedom-based life? Of course, if it is, then put it in place, roll up your sleeves. And I see a lot of light workers and stuff, spiritual folks also get trapped in this only doing what is totally like, in alignment and waiting for the right. And it's just like, yeah, okay, but that's what you said like 3 years ago too, and everyone's on their journey. So it's all perfect. But sometimes I think people feel like they're lying to themselves with this spiritual woo-woo language of let me meditate on it and blah, 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 when we actually do need to take a little bit of a healthy risk, right? Or a leap of faith, or to do something against what we've done in order to go to where we want to go.
That's the thing. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's misaligned. And that is such a nuanced conversation.
Yeah.
I personally, and maybe you can relate to this, but I don't like going out of my comfort zone very much. I prefer being comfy. I prefer things I'm naturally good at. But my growth and evolution has always been going up to an edge and then leaping off of it and realizing on the other side, I'm like, oh, actually, this is not so bad, first off. And also, this is exactly what I needed to get to where I want to go. So that end result in mind is such a big part of what we have to do. We have to do things that are uncomfortable. And then we also don't have to stay there. It's like this and also divine union of the really active energy and also the receptive. And we can be in both at the same time.
I really like that. And sometimes when we sometimes we also need to learn a new skill, right? So in other words, last year, setting up marketing funnels and infrastructure in the business, that's not the sexiest work ever, right? Going to the desert to speak at this amazing manifestation thing, that's the sexy work. And that's what I'd love to be doing. But in order for me to do more of that, sometimes we need the architecture or the things to back us in place, or else we're also capping ourselves. But you mentioned something in your, not the intake, but the get to know you thing that you submitted. It really sparked some curiosity. You said there's an evolutionary sequence we need to follow. And if we do things out of order, things can get weird. Can you tell me more about what that means?
I mean, in the most basic way, it's that you cannot eat the fruit of the tree you planted, yesterday. And also, you can't eat the fruit before you even plant the tree. And this is what some people are trying to multidimensionally skip ahead to.
Oh, that's so interesting. So, okay, this is really funny. My fiance and I we were just listening to a Tony Robbins 3-day event or something, and he was talking a little bit about different seasons, right? We've got the winter, the introspection, we've got the planting the seeds, then we have the harvest, or not the summer and the harvest. And sometimes we need to surrender to whatever season we are in, even if we prefer to be in a different one, because when we know when the time comes, that's what we're working towards. So how can we create more pleasure in the seasons that, let's be real, it's the roll up your sleeves kind of stuff, in order to then reap that, but to also balance enjoying the journey so that we're not always constantly seeking something out in the future rather than living where we want to be.
Yeah, there are so many things happening when we're looking at that seasonal conversation. And I think leaning into the natural cycles and understanding that that's how creation works on planet Earth is probably the first step for people who are, maybe you can relate, very multidimensional, and maybe remember realms where you could just think it and so it was, and it was just instant manifestation.
Yeah.
But here on Earth, there is a linear process, and earth is a step-by-step element, and you have to like weed the garden and then plant the seed. Otherwise, it's not going to grow. And so really aligning and accepting that that is how it works here and there is a process is one of the most important pieces. Because if we're expecting something different, when it takes some time, when it takes work, when it's not instant, that's where so many people just get frustrated, or they go into resistance and they actually wind up slowing everything down, or they try to skip steps and just get very confused and wondering why it's not working. And there can also be an element of giving up way too soon. So I think that learning how to enjoy the journey as you're speaking into it and not wanting to be somewhere else, or you can want to, but like being in gratitude for where you are while being curious and excited about where you're going instead of just wishing that you were already at the destination.
Right. Yeah, I resonate with that. One of the things that I love to do is ask myself, like, hey, what belief can I adopt right now that would allow me so much more ease and clarity with this, right? So if I'm surrendering to this thing that I'm currently going through, what can I believe, or how can I view this? And how also do I want to remember the journey? So it's not just about being miserable until you get out, right? But if we can start to do things like romanticizing our life a little bit, or to have these things where we are creating an output, right? We're doing the tough thing, and then we are going to go celebrate. We're no longer in this thing of like delaying our gratification, but we're also allowing ourselves to be satiated in gratitude, right? One of the books that we recently read was called The Gain in the Gap. And this like blew my socks off as a seeker, right? Somebody who's always been kind of guiding towards the next jump, the next level, the next windfall, the next manifestation. We can get addicted to this state of always seeking. And the reframe came from, if we always will be moving the goalpost, which we naturally will, because once you hit a goal, you'll want to do something else. In order to stay in a state of actual satisfaction and to not be miserable or to feel like you're always behind, we got to stop measuring ourselves between where we are now and where we want to be, because again, that will always be in the future, but instead actually measure the progress from where we've gotten or who we used to be. And that in itself is like a win each and every day, right? So you can start to appreciate things before the seeds or the actual like harvest is there.
Absolutely. And celebrating where you are and how far you've come puts you in the frequency of openness to all of the magic that can make the journey much more, well, speedy and enjoyable. So I am always also someone who is like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? I love growth and evolution so much. Yeah. I needed coaches to sit me down and say like, yes. And first off, take a breath and celebrate what you have done. And also, I love this practice of regularly, maybe every year or 6 months, actually sitting and writing down accomplishments that you have created. And tuning in to like, what have you done this week, this month, this year, this lifetime? Yeah. You know, I used to also say like, you know, like since the pandemic or something, like there's just so many times where we need to slow down and acknowledge, and then that primes your brain, that reticular activating system that's filtering your reality to say, oh, I might not know how, but I can do hard things and I have done it and I'm very accomplished, and look at this. And it just really fulfills that piece of us that needs to know that you are doing it and you can do it and you have done it and you will do it. And it's really helpful.
So amazing. I love to use ChatGPT for that too. I track all of my manifestations, every single windfall, every single win in a thing, so that I just have this ongoing chat. And then by quarter, by the end of the year, I can summarize every single thing that I may have forgotten about, right? And it puts you into a state of, oh shit, like we actually have gotten, you know, a lot further than we realize. When, I know, those hardest days too, you can look back on it and be like, wow, like, you know what, today was a shit day and here's X, Y, and Z, right?
Mm-hmm. I love that. And having that consciousness and awareness helps you to sink into being okay with this moment right here and now, right? That pleasure in the present moment and not trying to just get away from the present, right? The present, here where you are, is where all your power and your potency and your magic actually exists. So I think this is a really important conversation.
Yes. And speaking of pleasure and speaking of desire, so you had shared pleasure and desire are creation energy that's related to money, right? It's related to magic. It's related to power. And I think this ties in so well to our next topic, which is how do we harness that, right? Like, how are we meant to use that kind of, right? Like, that is life force. It's literally the creation of everything. Everything comes from sex, right? Like, that is the way we give birth. That's the way we evolve. That is the way we create. So what other ways can, we use that, especially in a sense of abundance, business, right? Or manifesting our wishes?
I mean, I would like to write a book on this someday. There are so many things.
Please do.
It depends on the individual, but like let's talk about at least two things. Number one, it's so individual, but I think letting yourself get excited and turned on by life, by being available to passion, by being available to being present and engaged and not worrying so much about the past and the future in that present moment, and seeing like what ripeness and richness there is that just gets your motor revving, whatever that happens to be, because it's different for everybody, is really, really important. And then the one that I love to teach, that is not anything I've ever heard anyone talk about anywhere else, but I love working with the earth energy, the consciousness of this planet, with Gaia, because she is all about this energy of creation, life. She is all about that magic. And she has shown me how we can actually work with her consciousness to come into our own nervous system, to expand our capacity to handle stress and receive pleasure. So that's a really fun thing we do in my world.
I would love to experience whatever that is. That sounds amazing. Do you have any tips for anyone on this call, right? Or anyone catching the replay on, like, what would you say to a total beginner in that sense? How could you start working with, the earth, or what questions could you ask to start allowing that kind of, activation to take place?
It always starts with your own body, because basically we are created from the earth. We are made of her. And so we're not actually separate. But the thing that really limits us is if we're disassociated at all from the body. And so we have to start there and actually letting ourselves feel sensual pleasure, like even just literally touching your skin and seeing how good that can feel is so profound, because we don't usually spend time really like caressing and feeling ourselves in a way that does turn us on, right? Most of us. I mean, some of you might. I hope you are already. If you're an object beginner, this might be new for you, right? To just explore what it feels like to feel good in your body is the first step. And then bringing in more sensuality, because the whole point of being in a body and not just like a spirit floating around is to experience the full gambit of human experience, which is not just pain. And too many people have experienced so much pain that they have literally left their body. And we can retrain the nervous system to experience pleasure as well. And it's one of the most, people talk about nervous system regulation, but it's actually like a reclamation of the nervous system to experience pleasure instead of just pain.
This is so amazing. And I think, so many people are disconnected from their authentic wants and needs because they're wearing all the masks, they're being the responsible one, they're holding it all together. And then they've forgotten along the way that, like, life is more about what we experience in the moment. It's about wearing the nice clothes, right? Using the fine china, having those moments to slow down. And some of the most intimate moments, with my fiance have been through simple eye gazing, like the most simple things, like not these extravagant, right, magical moments, but like the small, profound choices in everyday life. And I think also, if you're somebody that is on a healing journey, right, there may also be blocks to allowing pleasure, desire, right, or like higher states into your life. I recently just did a 3-day certification in theta healing. And we were going through this really cool construct, how you can download feelings that you've never experienced. And it's really hard to manifest something if you've never experienced it before. That's why they tell you to go check out the Range Rover, go take it for a test drive, go to the open houses before you're ready, like walk into the store where you don't feel like, you've ever been there before, because you need to be able to feel and see it. And so if you've come from, say, a broken household or a childhood that was quite volatile, and you've never experienced or understood unconditional love, right, or unconditional joy, But in my case, it was blocks to feeling bliss. I was like, bliss, like I'm too, like I was always just on a rat race of chasing and creating and making, that while I was quite happy in my personal life, like bliss wasn't something that I could comprehend. Like it was just a word, right? So I started to ask what it feels like to download these things. And until we can actually bring that into ourselves, we can't actually experience it regularly because we feel like it is separate from us, rather than allowing ourselves to be sort of saturated in whatever it is that we're craving the most.
Yes. And I've never trained in theta healing, but I use that practice in my modality, evolutionary alchemy, and Gaia can help with that so much.
Oh, okay.
So I love bringing people into states of bliss and pleasure and presence. And she can do that when she fortifies the nervous system, because instead of downloading it, you're basically just uploading it from her consciousness. So same idea with a different origin, or maybe it's the same anyway.
The
I love
nervous system is huge, right? And sometimes, we've become so accustomed to living in a hamster wheel, right? Or being dysregulated for longer states that we don't actually realize how dysregulated we are, right? Because it's become normalized. Earlier last summer, we were on our first family vacation. We did this amazing road trip, and I realized that I was stuck in what's called functional freeze. It is the opposite of freeze, meaning that you're frozen in doing and that you couldn't actually stop it if you had tried, right? So what is your stance on, I guess, recalibrating the nervous system? Like, what are some everyday practices people can do to stay in a state of, moving towards their window of tolerance, being outside of their comfort zone, but not actually getting to the point where they are so discombobulated that they can't manifest, they can't change their state, or they can't really alter their reality?
So sometimes we need to literally do some healing, some trauma clearing and things like that. And if we're just in a general state of anxiety and it's not a trauma that really needs deep support to clear, I love the holy trinity for me of breath, movement, and sound. Those practices are super helpful.
I love breath.
And I find a lot of people have trouble, they're like, I can't meditate. It's like, because you have too much energy really in your body. You got to go and expel the energy somehow, creatively, get a sweat, have an orgasm, do something to get that out. And then you can sit and connect to the earth and the cosmos and restore the divine flow, which is a big part of the foundation of the work that I do. So we are not running off our battery power anymore, because that's what happens when we're in a fight, flight, freeze
Amen.
state. We put up these shields and then we cut ourselves off from source, from the earth, from parts of ourselves and from each other. So we need to reconnect, operate from the divine flow, which gets our toroidal field, moving as it should, and then creates coherence and can help us through meditation or breath or movement, that kind of thing, go into the parasympathetic rest and digest, and that coherent state where your body can heal and you can receive and you can feel pleasure and you can be connected. So I really teach get the energy out of the way first, and then come and sit. And I teach a 10-minute practice to get that flow restoring yourself. And then that's my combo, and it works like magic for my students.
It sounds so juicy. I absolutely love that. And what's funny too is, even as spiritual beings, very dialed in, intuitive people, sometimes the level of guidance or epiphanies or realizations we can have is limited by being dysregulated, right? Like I'm channeling every single day. I'm constantly tracking things psychically. That's my world. I speak that language. And I had the biggest epiphany over the past month when I was healing this burnout that happened over winter break. I realized that the guidance that I was getting is entry level guidance. Like for others, I can read them like a book, but because I was not allowing myself to slow down enough to really go deep, and until I did this massive breath work, I healed something that was a very, very stubborn blind spot for me. But the guidance couldn't actually come through until I started using my breath to cycle deeper and to actually open to the full truth of the situation, rather than what I thought I was working on over weeks, right?
Absolutely. Anytime we're in any kind of dysregulation and survival state, it's our ego that we're operating from, trying to keep us alive. And so it is limited. When
Yeah.
we want to tap into soul or source or highest self or what have you, we need to have access to that parasympathetic state for the unity consciousness that we can tap into, or the body wisdom, or a channel that's really pure, because any
Mm.
kind of shields that we are holding, even if we don't understand it, can distort or block the full package of electromagnetic information that wants to come through.
1000%. I love the way that your language is so, this is the first time we've had a longer conversation, but your language is so, it's excellent. It's profound in terms of like I don't know how to say, like the way that you're articulating these concepts with the earth and the frequencies and the electromagnetics. Like it's, I've never heard someone express themselves that way, but it's really fantastic to hear. What you had shared just now around, the greater truth or higher levels of truth, right? Or different dimensional lenses of truth, I think is a great preface for what we also wanted to talk around: your soul's trajectory, and sometimes pursuing things that are taught to you, or doing things, contrary to what you're actually being called to do, may not be as effective as your authenticity or leading with your soul's truth. Can you share a bit more about how you discovered that in your own world?
I have discovered this through trial and error. So if you know, you know. I'm a 3-5 generator. So,
Okay.
I mean, I came to this world to teach this after lifetimes of being a divine channel. I was told I would be a spiritual teacher when I was 8 years old. I have so many memories from spirit. And I just know that this is how we're supposed to operate. And still, there were times when I would outsource my power to people that were doing things that I wanted to do, that had maybe more experience, and I would try their thing on. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I would try theirs on, and sometimes it would fit and I would take a piece of it and I'd be like, okay, great, I'm going to alchemize this. But sometimes I would try it on and it would actually pull me so far off of my soul's truth that I would start getting confused. I think it has to be an alchemy of learning from other people and experiencing it and being like, yes, for me, no to that, yes, for this. But if we ever give our power away and say that somebody knows better than we do because they're richer or they've got a bigger business or something, we've put them on a pedestal somehow, and it's taking us away from our soul truth, then it becomes a problem. But it's never actually the wrong thing, because it might be leading you, like it did for me, back into remembering the soul truth of what we're here to do is to really be a clear channel for our truth and authenticity, no matter what other people are doing.
It can be a scary concept too, to trust that, right? To trust where you're being guided, especially when it disrupts maybe the way we've been taught, right? Or it contradicts what you've been trained as. And there's been so many times that I still do this consciously, right? I constantly will take a look at, am I morphing into something? Am I not? Am I trying to filter for other people? Am I trying to, and am I carrying imprints of past coaching programs and, basically just parroting their ways of teaching? But I've never actually gotten to the point of understanding how to discern this without going back to reconcile it. So in other words, we watch ourselves, it happens, we catch ourselves, and then we clear it, right? And then it gets corrected. But how can we do this as sort of like an act of devotion on an ongoing basis so that we're not actually getting to the point of getting pulled off track and then returning back home? Do you have any perspective on that?
I mean, I have a theory, and I personally learn from trial and error and from forgetting and remembering. So I am not perfect at this.
Okay.
The practice that I use daily, which I call just prepping your field and connecting into that source energy and getting back into the divine flow, opens your channel up in a way that is so profound, and you can easily ask and get answers. And I like to have a daily practice of basically, what shall I do? What would be, the most profound and potent thing that I can work on today? What would you have me do? What's the next right step? And literally just being in your own channel and getting your own information is the way to do that. However, I can do that at the beginning of my day and then watch, someone else's live and be like, oh, I could do that. Oh, that's such a good idea. Right. And get pulled off course. So I would say we would need moment to moment checking in all of the time. but
Mhm.
I don't do that because I am human as well as divine. And so it's
Yeah.
a constant return and reclamation.
Perhaps that's maybe the gift of it too, is realizing that by prioritizing that or like assigning value to this, right? We want to value our authentic self. We want to be in a future where we don't wake up one day and we have the midlife crisis of, oh my God, like, who am I? Why did I choose this? I chose all these weird things and like, this does not fit. This is where people start to have those destructive things. They buy the weird convertible and they leave behind their wife and kids because they realize they went way too far gone, right? So if we're choosing it on an ongoing basis, even if it's not perfect, and sometimes we tend to, be inspired by others, right? Let's be real. And we want to learn from them, which is healthy. Perhaps the best thing that we can do is actually just allow ourselves to feel into, right, our body sensations. And I know I'm off track when I'm starting to get like resentful, dissatisfied, like it feels like it's not even fun. I don't want to do this anymore. Or other times where I felt like I needed to do it a certain way in order to fit in, right? In order to resonate with a mastermind or with people that I look up to be, rather than seeing my uniqueness, right, as a gift. And I think for others, they probably are still in the deconditioning phases of letting go of those beliefs with the workforce or other jobs or past partners, right, where they decided to divorce a part of themselves in order to belong. And that's also through letting go of some of those, I guess, wounds, right, where we felt like we were a misfit, we didn't have our place, we didn't have our calling. Maybe it's because we're actually guided to create it, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I also think if we take regular conscious time to tap into the bigger vision, our future self, and really get that like North Star divine guidance, even if it terrifies us,
Mm-hmm.
then we can kind of have that guiding us. And then the moment to moment, what shall I do now? Decisions are always leading us towards that. So I think zooming out to where
Yeah.
we're going and then bringing it back to where we are now and what's the very next right step makes that gap a little easier to navigate and keeps us on that blinder path. But I also don't believe in making mistakes, because when I've done something that's taken me off course or off track, whether it's an investment or, like a misstep or me launching a program and it wasn't the one, I always learned exactly what I need for
Right.
what I'm doing anyway. So you can turn it all into gold.
It's true. And that comes back to that gain in the gap perspective too, right? Is sometimes a lot of people, they create these ideas that, oh, I'm just not meant for this. Maybe that's just not for me. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. And they create this whole identity rather than seeing it as okay, well, that definitely did not go according to plan, right? Or that was not the outcome that I intended to create. So one, why did this happen? Is it because I'm a match to that vibrationally because I have beliefs that are creating that, or because it's actually something that I needed to master by tweaking it, right, and refining it. And it's an ongoing quest, right? But the best thing that we can do sometimes is asking, okay, if this wasn't this, like, what would it take to recreate this but successfully, or to have the desired outcome? And how can we make it easier this time to bring in more truth, right, more alignment, and to let go of some of the fluff, right, or the busy work that actually prevents us from going all in on what quantum leaps us or slingshots us into the trajectory that we're aiming for.
Exactly. And also just telling yourself the stories that are going to support you in being okay with it. So instead of making it about you not being like worthy or capable, if it doesn't work, it's not personal. It is the fact that a master has failed more times than a beginner has even tried. It's that a scientific experiment doesn't fail, even if the hypothesis is proven not to be true. We learn and get so much clarity from realizing, oh, that's not it. Right? Sometimes that is so much more valuable.
Yeah, there's a behavioral model. I wish I had the graphic handy. I'll have to look it up and maybe I can tag it in. Somebody was talking around, when we have a goal, right? We have a thing that we want to do. We have this sort of like delusional confidence that it will be easy. And for sure we can work, sometimes you'll see the social media post, you're like, just launch this passive income business and like print money on demand. And you're like, wow, that sounds so cool. So you have this delusional confidence, right? Or this, I think it was, what was it? I forget the right term, basically something that tells you that it should or must be this easy. And then you go down the trajectory and you start to play it and you go for it. And then you realize, oh my God, I've got all these doubts and fears coming up. And oh my God, this is actually not as easy because I have to learn this for the first time. Mm-hmm. And there's a moment in this very predictable graph, right? It's a model of human behavior. It's called the Valley of Despair. And this is where most people give up, right? They return back to the no and they're like, okay, yeah, that did not work out. It's not leading me anywhere. Not meant for it, or maybe this is just too hard. I'm going to go back to what feels certain. And it's like right before you hit the gold mine, right, where most people drop off is actually where we need to double down and to just start asking, right, guidance from the future self, from our higher self, or from what else we can integrate in those moments to actually reach the point where it then becomes like a competence. And, I also think in the spiritual community, sometimes there is those false assignments of meeting rather than a willingness to just learn a new skill, right? To like learn something that is not spiritual. Last year in my business, there was these moments where I actually had to unplug from being a spiritual business owner, an intuitive business owner, because there was things I wasn't willing to do, right? Like learn the accounting or learn the spreadsheets and stuff that just needed to happen. And I wouldn't have been able to get there if I was still so dialed into just only doing what feels, guided versus what sometimes is like the holistic approach of someone that has a sustainable growing business.
Absolutely. But I would counter with, that's like, who told people that that's not spiritual too, right? Like there's spirit in everything.
Yeah.
The money. And that's why I love working with the earth as well, because she is the realm of like linear systems, structures, containment, finances. Like it's maybe not what we think of as spirit, but like it's spirit embodiment into something real and tangible. And that's my favorite piece, is like helping people access infinite bliss, remembering who they are, but then doing something real with it, something that can make the world a better place. And that means learning the 3D tangible pieces too.
It's true. It is, it's like setting up the pathways, right? So you want this amazing manifestation. Sure, you can have it, right? But would that kind of person if it arrived tomorrow, would you be able to hold it? Would it be sustainable? And if the answer is no, then, what does need to be put in place in order for that to be something that also stays with you rather than, right, goes out the window? Yeah.
And I work with and have for about 15 years, the 5 elements to create a unified field. So not just the earth, but which represents, the physical realm, but also the air realm of all the mental things, the water realm of all the emotional things. Spirit is, of course, the ineffable, but then fire is the action realm. And if we're missing any one of those pieces, our creations are unsustainable.
Interesting. Okay. So people in this moment could also ask themselves, like, if there's anywhere I'm out of balance, like what is the missing element, or where do I need to amp something up, and where do I maybe need to like turn down the heat a little bit, or right, come into balance there. That's a great piece of advice. I love that.
Yeah, it's very helpful because it is tangible. We can equate, like emotions to water. Okay, it's neat. They got to flow. If they don't flow, they're going to get all stagnant and swampy. So what do we need to clear? And then what do we need to feel on purpose? Like you were talking about with the bliss, when we have a clear and clean emotional realm, we can feel things just because we want to, just because we said a word. We can use our imagination and memory to get there. So I love focusing on clearing out whatever's blocking us from each of the elements, and then directing consciously whatever it is that we need to bring our creations into form.
This is huge. And I think so many people miss this integration piece too, right? And integration is like, it sounds boring and it sounds long, and it can be done so many ways. But I've made this mistake too, where I was constantly clearing my blocks to the point where there was nothing left. Like, I'm not saying I'm fully, like stuff will come up from time to time, and then we'll know it's time to lean in and do another unraveling. But you can't keep chipping away at like what isn't there, right? So unless we're actually also installing stuff, downloading stuff, practicing the new skills, practicing a new state of showing up differently, or as a result of letting go of this lifelong pattern, this deep wound, how are you now going to act in your relationships that asserts the new standard, asserts the new boundary, right? Owns your worth. And if we are doing the misstep of just clearing, but we're not actually embodying, then we're going to be on this never ever healed enough cycle which also keeps us, and it's almost like a spiritual trap, right? Like it keeps us in this state of moving, but not getting anywhere where life can actually start to change or get really, really good.
I find it's almost the same energy of having to move from the business of like
Yep.
building, hustling,
Yes.
hurrying into the pleasure and the receiving. It's going from healing journey to you're a conscious creator and you heal things as they come up, but you also have to be taking matters into your own hands as this fractal of the infinite that wants to create and wants to do things. And that piece around getting stuck in healing is really challenging for some people to accept that you don't stay there. It's a process. And then there's an end point where it's like cleaning out a hoarder's house when you originally start. And then it's more like your general upkeep of just sweeping and doing the dishes.
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes we tend to start and think the same way, maybe like an engineer, right, who is very like logical solutions driven. They're trained to think a certain way. And I know in our stuff when we're going through these amazing modalities and we're learning and we're also going through our spiritual awakening, right, where we are stripping so much like layers and lifetimes of blocks and healing and wounds. We train ourselves to think in a certain way, right? And then everything in our life almost gets attributed to, oh, well, this must be XYZ, rather than seeing stuff as choice, right? If the universe provides something to you, it doesn't mean you need to go back and heal your mother wound for the 30th time ever. You can actually accept the circumstances, right? You can allow it. You can set a boundary, or you can say, okay, no, I didn't, that doesn't feel great. What would it take to outcreate this? What would it take to create something different? How can I shift my energy to attract a different outcome rather than always going back in time to like rip out the weeds once more when there's not that much left to clear?
That's where the pleasure conversation loops back in as well, because
Okay.
instead of always trying to clear the trauma, heal the
Yeah.
trauma, it's like showing your nervous system and body something new that can replace the old energy of pain.
Okay, interesting. I feel like there's a nugget here for people on the call, myself included, actually. So in those moments, right, if we have a assumption or an automatic belief that tells us there's more work to be done, what would you recommend replacing it with, or opening up that dialogue to use pleasure, right, and desire and co-creation instead?
The simplest way is to look at the frequency, the emotion, the experience that you were having and saying, thank you for showing me what I don't want. What would I
Mm,
like instead?
okay. I like that. It's simple and profound. So you've mentioned a couple of things around your daily practice, and if I'm not mistaken, there's a free gift that will give people a taste of some of those incredible energy tools, right, to harness their field and to upgrade. Could you tell us a little bit more about the free gift you have? I believe it is the Frequency Upgrade Academy.
Yes, I put a few of my favorite energetic tools that do go into the conversations about shields and that divine flow a little bit as well into some bite-sized lessons, about an hour total, but you can learn how to create the divine flow of the cosmic earth energy through you and activate your sparkle field so you're
Ooh.
magnetic to magic and in the frequency of abundance. And a few more fun things that I find really shift my experience and bring me so much more pleasure, so much more magic, so much more flow in my life.
I love this. Well, thank you so much for your generosity. So for anyone on this call or catching the replay, we will drop all of Kacie's links so you can follow her, connect with her on social media. She adds a ton of value. And then if you want to grab the Frequency Upgrade Academy, the link will also be below for you guys to opt in and see what's available for you when you tap into the sparkle field. I've never heard of that. I'm actually excited to check that out myself.
It's super fun. It is like upgrading your energy so you don't need shields to protect you. You have a high frequency field that is just gonna basically deflect any ick, anything that's not of that frequency, because everything's just vibing in this way that it's too quick for it to actually stick. But it also really keeps you open to possibilities instead of feeling like you have to protect yourself.
So cool. I love this. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for being a part of the conversation today. I really love everything you shared and all of those perspectives. I think right now the mantra is like, how good can life get consistently, right? And how juicy can we allow ourselves to experience the journey rather than just constantly waiting to, get to the end goal or the next destination before we can, really relax into enjoyment and pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I love geeking out about this stuff and hearing your perspectives as well. So thank you so much.
Amazing. All right, everyone. Talk to you guys soon. And if you want to connect with Kacie, you'll find her deets below. Take care. Until next time.